Hi, my name is Elizabeth Terrio. I'm in my third year of business at Laurentian University, and I had the pleasure of doing my co-op this year at the Canada Revenue Agency. So, the Canada Revenue Agency is much more than just an area where your taxes get processed. Essentially, it's divided into two different areas, one being the TSO and two being the TC. So, the TSO is essentially just solely involved with collections and large-scale audits, whereas the TC side, which is the tax center, is involved with many different things such as processing your taxes, issuing refunds, ensuring that individuals are getting their proper benefits like child tax benefits, GST rebates, Trillium, and much more. In the TC side of things, we also conduct limited reviews, which is also to help out office audit on the TSO side, and that is the area in which I am in. So this year I got the pleasure of taking on the role of a compliance service officer, which I was then able to advance into the position of a senior office auditor after taking the courses of Intermediate Part 1 and 2 of accounting at Laurentian. Essentially, what differentiates our limited reviews compared to office audit is that we receive our cases from taxpayer requests. And although we still do questionable claims, that is mostly where we get our work. So our reviews consist of verifying expenses, and these expenses always pertain to income such as business, rental, interest and carrying charges, and dispositions of shares and property. When conducting our audits, it is crucial for us to keep working papers, an audit plan, and possibly have a phone interview with the taxpayer. These items are crucial in our job because we need to have proof of everything we are touching and everything we are doing to keep track of what we're denying and what occurred in the case. So if we have a business case and the taxpayer is claiming all these different expenses that they have no proof of payment on, we need to document that in our working papers, and we need to document if they're not meeting our tax requirements. And essentially, that is what we do. So our reviews consist of verifying expenses pertaining to income such as business, rental, employment, interest and carrying charges, and dispositions from shares and property. When conducting our reviews, it is our responsibility to keep an audit plan, working papers, and often perform phone interviews. Our audit plans are typically our first step in our reviews, as we need to document all the current information we have on hand, and usually this will aid us later in our cases typically. Our working papers come once we have received a reply from a taxpayer and we get to finally work their case. This is one of the most critical parts, as we need to document everything that's getting denied and on what premise. So this typically involves us researching and referencing the Income Tax Act. Frequently, we do conduct phone interviews as well, which we try to keep on record and note everything that happened during that phone conversation. And this is very critical and something that's often missed, because when you phone someone, you don't document it, but it is important, as for the next person who receives your file would possibly need to know what happened during the phone interview, or if your case goes to appeals or the tax court. Another responsibility that occurs more frequently now that other programs are involved in the CRA are referrals. And this happens if anything that's outside of our scope needs to be verified and looked into further. Theories I learned this year that I want to take the opportunity in this video to discuss with you are mostly related to HR. I'm a very technical person, so taking theories that I learned in accounting and finance aren't hard for me to apply. But when it came down to HR, I kept thinking back to that one class we took in our business program and thinking, oh, hey, we learned that, and we learned that, and we learned that, even if it was just simple things. After my hectic year, it was nice to be finally put into an environment on days where I had all the resources I needed at my fingertip. I was never waiting for a question to be answered to get to the next step in one of my cases, and I was never waiting on someone to help guide me through a phone conversation. And even when resource was busy, I knew I had my coworkers to help support me. And that was such a nice environment to finally be placed in, because I had never had the reassurance from others to help pass ideas along with each other. And I never had that group environment where you finally got to work together as a team to finally come to a conclusion of what's the best practice for a situation like this, or when it comes to something like this, do you have any reference to how you applied what you learned from that case? So that's where I was really happy I was finally put into a teamwork environment. And given everything that happens in your personal life, it's really nice to know that the work gets distributed one way or another. Another thing that I felt really important that I also learned in my HR class was organization. Organization is key in any work environment to get proper efficiency and production out of your work, because after all, that's what you are there to do. And after coming back to the CRA, it was really cool to see my improvement and how I felt less stressed because I was so much more organized. There was trackers for tracking what cases you have touched within the day, because you need to document all of that in your timesheets. And there was trackers for tracking where your cases are at, if they're at proposal stage, if they're closing, if you had a certain conversation with a taxpayer. There's trackers for everything to help you stay organized and on top of your cases. And those weren't necessarily trackers that I had used prior to. So I learned how important it was to have your employer keep you on track as well and give you the tools necessary. Although I had them before, I wasn't necessarily made aware of them, or I didn't go looking for them. So knowing this time around what to do and who to talk to made a huge difference for my organizational skills. Challenges I feel as though I've overcome this year have been going from one fearful work environment to another. Originally, I had a really bad experience with the CRA, as one of the cases I had received ended up being a taxpayer that had consistently harassed me. I would get constant phone calls day after day, minute after minute from him, and that ended up being a very fearful experience for me. I later then went to Collins Barrow, where I not only realized how much I had put on myself, but entering into that new environment that was extremely uncomfortable and critical left me coming home every night just wanting to cry. And I feel as though I truly overcame this by putting myself in the position to having to go through the process again. I interviewed for jobs and had several job offers where I came to the halt having to decide what I really wanted. And that ended up being to go back to the CRA. And I feel as though I went back to the CRA because I wanted to overcome the challenge of what the job truly entails, and finding a love for tax and taking the tools that I've learned from personal and corporate tax and being able to apply them 100% to my job. I also learned throughout this whole process that I am apparently actually a shy person. And by knowing this about myself, I was able to then speak up after having such bad experiences. And I was able to let my managers know when I felt as though I needed more help. And clarifying things could take just a simple 15 minutes to learn how to close a case just because I needed a refresher, or telling my manager, you know what, this personal circumstance occurred in my life. Could you be a little bit more lenient? And that honestly resulted in a lot less stress for all of us. And now I can honestly say that I come home every night from my job and I'm happy, and I never have to worry about bringing work home with me. During this year, I feel as though one of my biggest accomplishments for me was learning to explain myself and properly phrase my thoughts. In my working papers, originally I had so much difficulties explaining my outcomes of my cases since I didn't know how to properly word the results or reference the Income Tax Act to support my decisions. I just knew what the actual outcomes were, and now I can make working papers with ease. I feel as though another accomplishment that really happened this year was being put in a true group environment and just being able to learn as much as possible. It is with great happiness that I let you know that my contract has been extended, and I would like to take this time to thank you for all the support throughout this whole process. It has truly been a valuable experience for me.